am so excited to be here with my friend Greg Brooks. Greg, thank you so much for having a conversation with me. That's now being recorded. So just try to,
Yeah.
remember that about each other. No, I'm so grateful. Greg's been an incredible friend, really brother in the faith and in leadership. We're going on close to 10 years and knowing each other and coming alongside each other and just partnering in ministry. What I love about you is that one, yes, you're in the finance space and helping churches with church loans through WIF, but at the same time, you have an incredible, rich church leadership background, and you get to kind of live in both worlds. They might bring you in because they need some help in the finance world, but at the same time, you get a whole perspective and look at their ministries and their strategies. And I'm sure you're pulled into so many of those conversations. So that's what I'd love to explore. One, what are you seeing out there? What would you challenge us with? What would you encourage us with? So let's dive right in. Is there anything I missed? Obviously, an incredible husband and father. I know I missed a lot of that. Lauren, I love you. So thank you so much for letting us have your husband for a little while today. So,
Hey, man, you did forget one thing, and this is like a new thing. Okay,
all
so
right.
I'm okay with you forgetting it, but I'm an aspiring golfer, so I'm trying to pick. I
Yes,
need more golf apparel because I'm thinking if I wear the apparel of a golfer by osmosis,
right.
I'll become a
That's right.
golfer.
That's
So
right.
I'm really believing for that to be true.
I like aspiring. I too try to just not lose a lot of balls, but it's impossible.
Yeah,
Impossible.
impossible.
Oh man, I know that one of the biggest things that help in kingdom growth is relationships. And as those relationships I have seen is one of your superpowers, to be honest. It's what's made you so extremely successful, even in the world of helping partner with churches and get those churches partnered with WIF. Where does that come from? How did you discover that to be your strength? And how did you align that with what you do now at WIF?
Yeah, man. For me, I just love people. Honestly, it's a genuine love for just loving people. What's sad to me is I think back to my high school years. I got my yearbooks out recently, and I was cleaning out the basement, found my yearbooks, and wanted to show my kids. And man, I was so excited. Like, look at the autographs. Back in the day, we had all these
Yeah.
notes, and I've got phone numbers on there. They probably don't work. I didn't call any of
Yeah.
them, but they're there.
KIT, man. KIT. You got to keep in touch.
Yeah, so it was so I'm going through the pages, and then I get to this one page, Philip, and I'm like, oh man, this hurt my heart. And I thought about why. And let me tell you what the page was. So seniors have senior superlatives.
Yeah.
So we have these things that go in the yearbook, like, most likely to kind of moments. And there was the friendliest of our high school. And I'll never forget, there was a guy named Jacob who won the award of friendliest. And why it hurt my heart when I flipped over to that page was I was second runner up. And it reminded me that I was second runner up. So I don't know that if intrinsically, I just try
Wow.
to be more friendly now
Right.
because I never want to be second place in relationships again. So that
Wow.
may be the driving factor for me because I want to be the friendliest,
You know what?
Um, but honestly, one of the joys in my heart in my life is to see other people win. And so I feel like for me, I'm called to be a bridge. I'm not called to be a number one. I'm called to be a bridge to help number one and number two get together and accomplish something great. And
Yeah.
so for me, regardless whether I'm, helping an organization and nonprofit work that I've done before, or being on staff at a church, or even now serving churches at WIF and helping them find funding for the vision that God placed on our heart. It's really the same thing for me, man. It's just creating great friendships and trying to be a bridge to their destiny and helping them whatever that next step is.
Man, what I like about that too, and if you're willing, share the even your connection to WIF was kind of birthed out of that too. Is Craig just extended an opportunity for you to have a safe place to, have a next, and it wasn't supposed to turn into, I think you're running on 10, 11
Yeah,
years,
almost. Yeah.
being there. Like tell us a little bit about that and how that's also kind of built you up in the areas of relationship, because that's a lot of our story with Phil and myself, is that he gave me an opportunity and said, I'll give you a year if you give me a year. And he always held me with an open hand. And I said, man, that open hand, a lot of leaders will hold on to a person and say, you're mine. I've invested a lot in you. You can do a lot for me. but everybody's trying to get out like over a closed gripped leader. Whereas I found with an open-handed leader, it's just endeared me to Phil more and more over the last decade.
Sure.
Like, why would I want to leave when a person is empowering and resourcing? And so a little bit of our story, but I know you have a similar one. I think that's what also has knit me close to you.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful story of how the Lord just works in connecting us. And so it was about probably 15 years ago or so. I was serving with John Maxwell at Equip, which is a nonprofit organization for
Yeah.
leadership development, still doing incredible work and reaching the lost like never before. So it's really amazing to see the success of the organization today, and the growth of where it was when I was there 15 or so years ago. Well, I guess I was there probably 10, 12 years ago before coming to WIF, but I started 15 years ago. And I never forget, and this is who John truly is, and I think there's a valuable lesson in this is, he never discounts people. And
Yeah.
one of the things he says all the time is, when I see a crowd or I'm speaking to 10 people or 10,000 or 100,000 people, I see them with tens above their heads. They're all tens to me. They're
Yeah.
not five, they're not fours, they're not twos, they're tens. So he sees the value of people. And I never forget, Philip, I was at a booth working for Equip. I had just come on the team. I was just there, kind of go be a booth representative, and to tell people about the Equip and invite them into the story and see if they want to be a part. And it was at a Wesleyan gathering in Orlando, Florida. First time I had gone out, I'm standing at the booth, I'm shaking, I'm talking to people, I'm doing the thing, and John comes by, and I needed to speak into a room. And so I went ahead of him and got the room prepped and made sure he had his stool, his bottle of water, and the table, and he was going to be good to go. And then I was going to go back to my booth and do my thing because that's what I was there for. And John goes, no, 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 no. He said, hey, I'm going to lunch, and I want you and I want you to come to lunch with me and Margaret, my wife. I'm like, John, listen, man, I've been on your team like less than 6 months. I know you don't know me and I don't really know you. He said, I know. I want you to come to lunch with me. I want to get to know you. I'm like, well, great. And I was super humbled. I was in my early 30s and I'm going to go to lunch with John Maxwell. And at this lunch, we sat at I'll never forget, it was a Chinese restaurant. We took a golf cart over to this little Chinese restaurant, and he had invited Craig and Tammy Dunn, which was another couple
Yeah.
that at the time, I didn't know and had no relationship with. So we're sitting at this table, and literally, man, I'm sitting there. I'm in between these two couples, John, giant in the faith and in leadership. Craig, who I didn't know that I would later understand was actually also a giant in the faith, leading an incredible organization, helping thousands of churches. And so I'm just listening to conversation. I'm not talking. I'm
Yeah.
note taking. I'm
Right.
focused.
Right.
I'm just sitting there absorbing all that I can. And in that lunch, I felt a connection to Craig. And I thought, man, that's interesting. I don't know anything about him other than what I've learned in the
Yeah.
last 45 minutes to an hour of this lunch. And so I followed up and I just said, hey, Craig, could I have your number? Could we talk again sometime? And he was like, absolutely. Here's my number. And I said, awesome. And I sent him a little card and a little gift and just said, hey, man, thanks for letting me sit and
Yeah.
just listen. And that nurtured a friendship. And so one day I called him, and this is another great kind of a nugget moment for me that I learned something valuable. I scheduled a call with him and I said, hey, Craig, I know we just met and you don't know me and I don't know you, but I'd love to get to know you better. I said, a matter of fact, John's CEO, Mark Cole, was such a close friend and a mentor for a number of years. And because I was working for John, oftentimes you don't want to have a mentor that you work for because that
Right.
can get real awkward and you can't really be as vulnerable or as transparent as you probably want to be. And sometimes they're not as vulnerable back with you because they're like, man, we've got this workflow going and the dynamic has shifted.
Yeah.
And I needed someone who understood my world, but wasn't in my world. And I think when we're looking for mentors, that's a valuable lesson that you need somebody who understands where you are, but it's
Yeah.
not working where you are. So they can really lean in and help with that. And so
Yeah.
I called Craig and I said, hey, will you be a mentor and help me kind of process through this season of leadership that I'm in? Because I'm in my early 30s, leading a pretty significant organization or a part of a significant organization. And because before I was the executive director, I was just on the team. And Craig said, no, I won't be your mentor. He said, but I'll be your friend. And I thought, wow. And so we scheduled
Oh, cool.
every month for an hour for 3 years. This
Wow.
started and it went for 3 years. Every month for an hour, we had a call. And on that call, I would lean into questions. Here's my personal life. Here's my leadership life. Craig,
Yeah.
what do you think about? And of course, I had my questions, and I never learned what Craig did. I had no idea. We never talked about him. We talked about some leadership challenges he was having within the organization, but it was more around culture and people or, things like that. But it was never, he used that more for examples than he did to like tell me what he was doing at the Wesleyan Investment
Yeah.
Foundation.
Yeah.
And frankly, I couldn't even spell Wesleyan. So I had no idea what was going on and what he was doing. And so years later, fast forward those 3 years of it being on the call for an hour, getting really close to one another, having a deep relationship and a deep love for Craig. And I went through a season where I needed to make a transition for some personal things that I was going through. And Craig said, "Hey, man, I got your back."
So good.
And honestly, Philip, when someone says, "I got your back," it's kind of like, I'm going to pray for you.
Right.
But good and well, they're not thinking about you the next time. It's not a consistent, prayerful, "Hey, I'm really going to the throne room for you" kind of prayer. It's kind of passive. And so I kind of took it, even though I knew Craig was pure in his intentions, I kind of took it as that. "What do you mean you got my back?" And so
Right.
literally a month goes by. I had gone to the office to visit him for the first time, came home, didn't think anything about it. And he calls me up, says, "Hey, man, I said I got you back in a minute." He said, "I'd like for you to come on the team at WIF." He said, "But in this transition," and he said, "I want to give you a year to figure out what the Lord's called you to." And I said, "Well, what do you mean, Craig? Your office is in Indiana. Again, I can't spell Wesleyan. I have no clue what you do organizationally and what your kind of products and services are." And he goes, I don't need any of that." He said, "We're an organization." This was key. He said, "We're an organization that believes in sowing seeds to the sower and letting God bring the increase." And there's a
Okay.
scripture in the New Testament about this where it says, one watered, one planted, one watered, but it was God who gave the increase. And he said, "And the Lord's told me you're worth sowing into. So we're going to sow a year of employment into your life, and we're going to see what God will do." And he said, I'll tell you this, Greg." He said, "You've spent, a number of years of your life working for some really significant organizations that are making a great impact. And there's no doubt you've been an impact player. You've helped these organizations." He said, "But I want you to look at this as God wants you to find out who you are, not just what you can do." He
Yeah.
said, "So I want you this season of this year to be more focused on who you are and getting closer to Jesus, not what you can do for Jesus." And man, that blew my mind
What a
because
gift.
honestly, growing up in the church, growing up in ministry, it's just not kind of common language. It's more focused on production oriented. And again, that's nothing wrong. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's just different
Yeah.
because ministry typically focus more and business organizations focus more on production than they do on necessarily, the purpose of an individual based on who they are.
Yeah.
And so, man, that's what we did, and that was 8 years ago. And the first check came in January of 2017, where he promised me that he was going to give me a year of employment. And I get this check, and I kid you not, man, it was like Publishers Clearinghouse. I wanted to go outside, and I thought there was going to be an audience, that was going to look at me, and
Yeah.
I was going to celebrate the big check, and it
Well,
cashed. And so it was just a real joy. And then I'll never forget. I can still remember, man, where I was sitting in the neighborhood I lived in at the time. And it still makes me like, man, God's been so good. And I called Craig up and I said, "Hey, Craig, listen, this is month two, and your check that you sent me has cashed again. And I haven't done anything for the organization.
jeez.
And I can't receive this." He said, "No, no, no." He said, "Are you closer to Jesus today, closer today than you were yesterday?" And I said, "Craig, what I'm going through in this season of my life, Jesus is the only person I'm close to."
Right.
He said, "That's what we're paying you to do." He said, "Because the closer you get to Jesus, the closer you'll get to knowing who you are. And the closer you get to knowing who you are, the closer you'll get to knowing what you're supposed to be doing."
Yeah.
And man, it blew my mind. And so the Lord's been so kind to me. And here we are 8 years later. I can't join the team and have been with them ever since. And we've still had the same culture. We just sow seed and let God bring the increase. And I think it's freed me up in relationships to kind of full circle back to that, where I can have relationships where it's just seed. I'm just looking to sow seed into relationships. I'm not looking for production. I'm not looking for something from you. I want more for you.
Right.
And that was something I learned from Craig Dunn was I want more for you than I want from you. And it's been that way ever since, and God's blessed us. And, we've had some amazing milestones, both personally and organizationally, just because we've built that culture into our DNA.
Yeah. I was going to say that kind of radical generosity isn't just an isolated situation. Like in my time watching and seeing WIF come alongside networks and partnerships and churches, it's like that is who you are. And what I think is amazing, because you probably won't brag on this unless I prompt you, is that the year that they sowed into you, the trajectory of what has happened since you stepped into some of those partnerships, because you were whole, you were healthy, you were healed, has taken an exponential jump, right? Like
Mm,
the amount of both income that you guys have been able to use and to leverage to then fund churches has grown. I don't know exactly how much, but I've been in awe every time you've told me some of the numbers of what it looks like since that. And I think, and you can fill that in, but I think what's been cool is it was a long play, it was a deep investment, and it's produced exponential return. And I think that's so helpful in terms of like people that we see around us. And you said it right there at the beginning. What I'm learning from you is it's not what I can get from you, it's what I can do for you,
mm.
and that will always produce an exponential return.
Yeah, and honestly, man, it has nothing to do with me. The organization's been around for 80 years. We'll celebrate 80 years in 2026, actually. And Craig has been leading it now for this is his 25th year. He's actually retiring after this year from being the CEO. We got a fantastic, wonderful guy coming in behind him, Norwood, that's going to be our CEO and kind of take us from here to there, wherever there is that God's calling us to. And frankly, Philip, it's the growth that we've experienced in the last 8 years. I attribute it to the last 72 years
Sure.
prior
Yeah.
because there's shoulders that we're standing on that would the possibility today would not be the possibility today without the purpose of yesterday giving us a sense of guidance. And so what's fascinating is to speak to our growth a little bit and to put it in context. So we got to our first when I came on the team, we were sitting somewhere around $700 million on total assets. And so we were still large as far as a church loan fund, and we were still helping a lot of churches. And the team was incredible, and they were doing a great job. We had 17. I think I was number 17 on the employee list. We're now close to 40,
Wow.
8 years later. So we were sitting around $700 million. We got to our first $1 billion about 5 years ago. Okay, so it took us 70. I think it was 70 years to get to $1 billion in total assets. Then here's what's interesting, and this is the momentum. This is what John
Yeah.
Maxwell talks about, the law of momentum. But we got to 70 years, 1 billion. Then it only took us 7 years, excuse me, 70 years, and it took us another 2 years. No, it's 2 or 3 years to get to 2 billion.
My
So
God.
now, just 3 months ago, we crossed over $2.5 billion
Wow.
of total assets. So in 8 years,
Yeah.
we've grown by almost $2 billion in 8 years.
Wow.
And again, it's the foundation that was laid, the momentum that was carried. And as soon as you click in the right relationships in the right moment, you get the right moment. And this is one of the things too that I've learned in this is that I think so often we wait for the right moment to have margin. And what Craig understood and what we understood in his organization, I tell churches all the time, don't wait for the moment to build the margin to take advantage of an opportunity. Example of that would be 2008. We had this market crash that we all remember, and things went crazy. But WIF had been spending years having margin and putting money aside so that we would never have to do anything different. We could continue helping churches regardless of what the economy did.
Yeah.
And one of our most significant years of growth was from 2008 to 2011 and 12, where we were able to take ground because we didn't wait for the moment. We were building margin all along. And if you'll build margin into what you're doing, when the moment comes, you'll have the money to activate on that
Yeah.
opportunity. But oftentimes, church planners go, man, I want to get into building. I want to go do something great for God. But they are living paycheck to paycheck, tithe and offering to tithe and offering, week to week. And they're spending all that they're bringing in. And when you spend all that you bring in, you have no margin. So when the building does become available, when the moment does happen,
Yeah.
and the building you've been praying for goes to market and is up for sale, you've not built the margin to be able to afford it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just building in margin to our lives and even relationships take up money out of the situation. If we don't make margin in our own personal day-to-day schedules when the opportunity comes to minister to someone who's in need, our schedule's too full. We got too much going on. We can't
Right.
separate ourselves from what we have going on because we don't have the margin in our life to minister in that moment. And I just thank God for Craig and WIF because he had margin for an hour a month for me to invest and to pour into me. So when the moment came to mentor someone who needed mentoring, he had the space and the grace to take that time and pour his margin into that moment. And God's continued to help us build momentum.
So great. I see that a lot too in terms of leadership. Like I say, the best leaders you have to seize an opportunity tomorrow are the ones you're building today. And and
100%.
and if we can't give ourselves space and energy and time to build a leader when a building comes available, we can't say yes. Even if we had the money, we can't say yes to it because we don't have the people to lead us into that new opportunity or new service or new location, whatever it might be. That's just such a huge um, lesson in and of itself, is making sure that we have margin. How do we fight the noise of all the stuff that's trying to take our time, take our resources? Because something, in prep for this that you were talking about, you guys are starting to see some trends of risk takers and, some that are not as risky.
Yeah.
Like how do you cut through all of that to be able to discern some of these moments, and making sure that you have the right resources and the right things to say yes, or to take a step of faith maybe in that season?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, a couple of things, honestly. One of the deals, and this is going to sound cliche, but remember, I used to be on staff and pastoring. So I have a lot of, 3 points in a poem, and
Sure.
they usually are alliterations.
I was
And so
gonna
they're
say
going to
they
match.
better spell something
So,
out or start with the same letter or
yeah,
else.
yeah. but this is true. And we watched this happen. Churches that budget and people that budget, personal budget, church budget, even relational budget, take money out of the equation. This applies across the board. But if you budget your time, if you budget your money, if you budget any of those things in pressure, you're always going to miss it. But if you budget in percentage, you're always prepared. So here's what I mean. If I take a budget and I go, I'm going to budget based on the need of our community today. Well, the need for your community today is going to change tomorrow. So
Yeah.
you're constantly adjusting based on the pressure or the whoever's requiring more of your time. Let's say it's your personal life and you haven't budgeted time for your friends, your spouse, your kids, your work, your activities, and you don't have some type of a schedule keeping you within a percentage of your time. Then when pressure comes, you're going to respond to what needs the most pressure, not necessarily what's most important.
Mm.
So if you respond to what's creating the most pressure instead of what's most important, you're always going to miss the mark. But if
So
you
good.
budget and what based on percentages, so when a church gets $1 million gift, instead of the donor coming to you and go, "Hey man, here's $1 million," and they put pressure on you to spend it a certain way. If you value percentages, if you budget on percentages, you go, "Hey, listen, man, amazing gift. We already have, because our board's already approved, percentages of how we spend our money that comes in. So your donation, 10% is going to go to this, 20% is going to that, 30% is going to this, 20% is going to that. It's already allocated. And so the same is true in our personal lives.
Yeah.
If I know that I want to spend, 2 nights a week with my wife and we're going to have locked in time, I can't let the pressure of what the kids need from me
Yeah.
dictate how I respond in that moment. If I already have a scheduled percentage of my time allocated to spend with my wife, for Lauren and I to dive deep on a topic or to deal with a situation, we're going to create that. And then I can say, "Hey, guys, I don't have time right now, but let me tell you when I do have time.
Right.
Hey, donor, I know you're giving to me now. Let me tell you how that gift's going to be used, because we've already decided how these things get used, because we don't budget on pressure. We budget on percentages." And it just creates this qualitative response that helps you to make sure you have margin.
Right.
And if you don't do that, what's going to happen is the pressure of life, ministry, kids, family, church, need, that's always going to be. And the Bible says that the lowly are with us always. So there's always going to be more need than there are resources.
Yeah.
And if we constantly respond to need, we're not going to be able to respond to God's purpose and calling on our life, because not that those things aren't important or those things are not helpful, but they're not most important. They're not necessarily the best way to spend my energy or my time.
Man, that's so helpful. It's a reminder too of like this proactive planning, this proactive just lifestyle, to be honest, of saying, and I felt this in heavy seasons where is lots of pressures coming in or the schedule's getting overcrowded. There's a tendency even in my personal life to say, okay, I'm gonna stop focusing on what I eat. I don't have time for exercise, like those kinds of things. What I've heard the Lord say is control in a season what you can control when everything else is out of control. And so,
Yeah.
like,
Look,
some of those percentages, margins, oh my goodness, we have a special
my.
guest.
Hello. Hello.
I love this. I love this. I literally cannot explain what's
My
happening right
favorite
here.
people.
Oh,
I
that's
want
a
to,
great looking hey, Jared. Well done, sir.
Two of my favorite people in the world. I mean, I'm on a meeting. I get a text from Philip Engel, and I end the meeting.
no way. Yes.
In the
I
meeting.
just, Jared, what you're crashing, and I love this because Greg was just talking about how important relationships are, and I was talking about how he's like got the superpower of relationships. And as I'm talking, I'm thinking one of my other great friendships has come because Greg has connected me to Jared. And then and so I was just like, man, we're talking about learning from leaders. I thought Jared's an incredible leader. Let's get him in here. And who knows, this thing might come unhinged a little bit, and that's absolutely
Mama.
all right.
Mama.
So,
I don't know.
Jared,
I don't know what to do with that because Greg was the one to. I can't even list how many people Greg's introduced me to, and so to
right?
be considered in the same sentence is pretty wild.
Well,
You
that's
got
what
the
I
boy
get.
too much.
We love about you, Greg. I'm so excited to have you here, Jared. Give our audience just a quick snapshot who you are, what you do, how you met Greg, and we'll jump off from there.
Sure. So Jared Cagle. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I've been here my whole life, born and raised. My kids are ninth generation Hall County, Georgia. Fun fact. Uh,
Let's go.
we've been here for quite a while. I work for a guy named John Maxwell, leadership author, speaker, coach, who has impacted quite a number of people. Greg, there you go, my guy. Filled out
Great, ready to
the
go.
workbook. You went deep for that. Was that the workbook? That's not the.
That's the workbook.
That's something about Gregory. He does the workbooks. He's a workbook guy.
He is a workbook guy.
You know that? Like when he introduced me to the Enneagram, how funny is that? He's
That's funny.
who introduced me to the Enneagram, and he sent me the workbook. Because he's like,
Yeah,
you need to get to work. You don't need to,
you don't need to read this and think about it. You need to. That's saying something about you, who you are there, Jared, and how he
Yeah,
sees you. And that's great.
true. That's true. Yeah. And so anyway, I have a lot of thoughts on that too. But so I work for John Maxwell, been a part of his writing team now for a number of years, oversee our publishing company and content that we're developing. Um, and so I was actually introduced to him uh, because some mutual friends of Greg and mine that brought me in to do some temporary sales work about 12 years ago. And Greg hired me. After I did some of that temp work, he said, "Hey, I'd love for you to come in and be an operations coordinator," which really meant, "Can you be my assistant and make sure that my desk is clean?" And
Greg's also a visionary leader as well, is what we're saying. Yeah, I like that.
God loves you, and my name's Greg, and I have a great plan for your life, and you're going to be my assistant. So that's kind of what. Anyway, no, but so I jumped into that 12 years ago, and I've had 16, 17 roles since then with John, and am loving every minute of it. But yeah, Greg was a catalyst for a lot of that.
Man, Greg, what did
More
you see
fun.
in Jared when you first saw
So
him?
I actually had to get my phone out for what I saw in Jared because I just think it's representative
Oh,
of kind of the grind that Jared will put on. He'll produce and work and get it done, and he does it with a smile on his
So
face. But
dope. That's
I
so
had a
great.
name for him back in the day,
yeah.
and it was booth mode. So I mean, he would go booth mode on us, and so still to this day, this is Jared's booth mode picture from way back, way
God,
back. Bro, you look young.
I
Your
was
hair
gonna
still, I
say,
mean, you got a better fade today than you did then.
that is so
Uh,
interesting. Oh my.
so, man, one of the things I think when you find great leaders, that you've got to make sure that you strike when the iron's hot. And again, Philip and I were just talking about margin, Jared, and building in margin to our lives, and not budgeting or planning on pressure, but making sure we budget and plan on percentages. And I was applying that to relationships. And I would say that organizationally, one of the ways that Jared came on is that we had margin in our organization to hire people, and I don't mean like budget margin, I mean like time margin. So when you create margin in your organization, you can always find a spot for a great leader. But if you're just so tight and you got everything fixed and you're perfect and you don't have any problems and you don't have any margin and you don't have any space to bring in great leaders, you're never going to take advantage when you see one. And so for us, we didn't have a position for Jared. We created one because we had margin that we needed some work to be done. And we thought, hey, there's still a gap here that we need to fill. And Jared was a great guy to do that.
And I love that. I literally just had a conversation with my wife because I saw somebody like that, and the fleece is still out, but I turned to Ange and and everything in terms of like logistics and resources, we've set aside, we've got it, but it's like us pushing chips into the center of the table. And I said, I don't think we should, but I know I'm going to regret it because of exactly what you said. And of course, she like talked me into it. And I was like, all right, we're doing this. We're going to go out in faith. Let's go. Like that gets me excited too, as a leader and as a visionary, to say like, we got to take some risks at some point. And I think to have the resources to even take the risk is what you're talking about. I was talking with another leader just this week, and we were talking about organization, how the landscape has changed and how things are moving. And he says, this is just a principle I learned in the business world. You change or you die. Like it's one or the other. And so it's like, it just continues to give me faith and confidence as I hear something like what you're saying is, man, not only do we need to strike with opportunities and build in margin with resources, but even with people and that's probably marked my story so many. The people I've been with the longest are the ones that take the greatest chance on me. And so,
Wow.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, for us, I can give you some qualitative kind of what metrics that I think are applicable here. And
Yeah.
Jared would probably too. But it's, if you look at
spreadsheet.
churches that take out debt, okay, they actually are almost 5%. They're experiencing almost 5% more growth than churches that are not. They're actually almost double in baptism for churches that are taking out debt as opposed to those that are not.
Wow.
And here's why I think about this. And we all have stories in churches that we've talked to and connected with. Churches that don't take risk miss the opportunity for growth because they're so stuck on yesterday's decisions that they got to kind of pay for yesterday's decisions, and they're missing tomorrow's opportunity. And I think sometimes we got to go, hey, here's where we are. We've got momentum right now, and we can either cash in on momentum and see the continual growth, or we can get so stuck on making sure that we're debt free and have no one nothing, which I understand there's a principle there. And I'm all about Dave Ramsey and that principle, but I'm speaking both financially and relationally.
Right.
If all you do is focus on what decisions were made yesterday by people who were there and made that decision, and you pay for yesterday's decisions, you'll miss tomorrow's opportunity.
Yeah.
So at some point, you've got to go, hey, you know what? We're going to take some more risks. We're going to hire this other person that we need for the organization. And maybe it's not in the budget right now, but we're going to make a run at it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't strike now while we've got growth is not promised tomorrow.
Right.
So you better take advantage of what you have right now.
Yeah,
Jared,
I
man,
jump in. Phil. I mean, I don't know.
go for it. As I was going to ask, is like I've seen your life in the last 5-6 years. Like you're not a risk adverse at all. What fruit have you seen from it though?
Yeah, that's good. So we talk a lot around Maxwell leadership about how change is inevitable, but growth is optional.
Wow.
There's an inevitability to the fact that change is coming, or especially if you're trying to go somewhere. So it speaks exactly to what Greg just said. Greg's bringing the metrics. I'm not bringing the metrics. So I'm just going to piggyback on the other side of it. The way that we lead through change is so important. And one of the things that we talk about is, how do we make sure that our team feels a part of it to where it's happening with them, not happening to them?
Wow.
So often it's like we're either afraid to make the change because we don't want to upset the apple cart and make our team, whiplashed, at the same time, if you can learn that craft and that art of helping your team be a part of it to the point where it's happening with them, change is happening with them, and framing that in a way where, hey, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so change is inevitable. We're a part of that together because we're trying to go higher together. And this can be a process that we do together, not not apart. And so I wonder for leaders out there, especially pastors, I always wonder how many of them are maybe paralyzed to make decisions that are going to require so much change. And I see that a lot, especially in maybe smaller, mid-sized churches. But if you are willing to make the change and then you learn how to lead your team through that change by bringing them along the journey, I think it goes a long way.
Man, I love that. That's really great, Jared. I love the idea of bringing them with you. I wrote it down to share with our team, just as we're experiencing change as an organization right now. And I think the idea that bringing them more. Sorry, Philip, can I ask a question?
You go for it. I want to answer your question because I think I have an idea.
Yeah. And I would even say, Philip, you guys work with a lot of great churches, and you guys have helped a lot of people make some significant transitions, both in staffing and in transitions from senior pastor down to the next guy that's coming in to take over. What are you seeing when Jared talks about making change with? How are you guys at Focus 412 helping organizations bring their team along for making change with instead of to?
Yeah, that's great. I think the biggest hurdle, as Jared was talking, is intuitively a leader knows we need to change, and intuitively a good leader knows here's where we need to go. I think a great leader is a leader that contextualizes and communicates those moves in order to bring their team with them. Because that's the piece that I would say an immature leader is like, this thing happened, so we're going to respond this way. This thing happened, we're going to respond this way. And the team is just waiting for the next thing and trying to learn the next move, and they're just following along. Whereas a leader that's contextualizing and communicating is saying, here's the thing that happened to us. Here's my thought process, and here's why I think we're going to go this direction. What do you guys think? Now I know how you're thinking, how you're processing, the different options you're weighing, and I can now weigh in on that. And that takes longer. And that could be frustrating because your team's going to say stuff that you probably don't want to hear or didn't think was a right move. But you're collaborating in this process and beginning to say, okay, so next time the team's now thinking, oh, this happened. Here's my 2 responses. Here's my 3 responses. So I think that's a big part. If you're doing it on your own, that's massive. I would say if you're bringing somebody else in, and that's the joy that we get to have, is there is a little less emotion tied to somebody else's change. So it's able to have a little bit of disconnect and a little bit of foresight to say, I've seen this change a couple different times in a couple different contexts. Here are some of those paths or footsteps to take as we make the move. And so you have somebody kind of guiding you from the outside. I mean, I know this personally. The hardest organization I've led to change is my own, because I know why we did what we did and what got us here. And, and so it's really difficult when I invite outside voices. You two are some of them, of saying, I don't know. I know what I think I should do. I know what I want to do. I don't know if that's wise or not. Like, should we push the chips to the center of the table? And my dad is one of those. He said, if you want to go out, how do you want to go out? And I said, not slowly. I want to go out swinging. And he's like, well, there you go. It's like, not that we're going out. I don't want to introduce any fear there.
But you had to be reminded of that too, right? Like, even 100%. As simple, you're one of the more driven individuals that I know. And you're also one of the more self-starter. Like, you don't need a lot of ignition to get going. But even you needed your dad to say, hey man, how do you want to go out? Then you answered it.
Yeah.
Sure. He didn't tell you, hey son, you don't want to go out like this. Right. And I think there's a principle in there as well as leaders. When you're talking about communicating the context, man, that's a huge point. I don't think we can over communicate context when it comes to leading our people, because we're at the tip of that spear. We feel as leaders a much different reaction to change that's coming. We've had time to process it. We've
100%.
got sure. And so sometimes for me, I get almost frustrated when I have to communicate 2, 3, 4 times what I felt like I've already communicated. But it takes that long a lot of times to get people to the front, right? To get them to that context at the front. And we have to remind people also, how do you want to go out?
Yeah.
Do you want to go out kind of slow and resting? No, and when we have that reframing and the approach is we're going somewhere, and then you as a leader are continuing to give context, I think it changes the game for your people.
Yeah.
Let me
You
ask you this though, Jared, for you guys and what you've experienced, because this would be helpful for me to understand. How do you recognize when change is needed?
I mean, the change is always needed.
Ugh.
know? How do you
But
contextualize that for us? Contextualize that for us.
yeah,
Change is always needed. If you're doing great, so the knee jerk response is, hey, numbers are up, giving's up, everything's up to the right, retention rate of my team. I've got people that have been here for 20 years. Everybody loves to work here. Like, we're doing great. Nothing needs to change. And then 2, 3 years later, I don't know, maybe our data guy, Greg Brooks, could give us some metrics right here. I don't think it takes long if you start coasting on that plateau. If you're not willing to change when you're at the top, you're going to create your own plateau.
Right.
So
love it.
how do you know you need change? I think you always need change. Now,
Right.
I'm also not risk averse. I'm not change averse. And so I know that maybe some people would have a different opinion. But if you're at the bottom, pretty obvious you need change. If you're at the top, if you don't
Hard.
change and you don't evolve, there's only so long you can remain on that plateau
Right.
before you start going the other way.
Greg, you said something even before we got started, is that you had some conversations recently with some leaders, and it's just prompting. I think that there's I don't want to steal the thunder, but talk about the idea of activity and depth, because I think that
Yeah.
might be the answer to even what Jared just said, is what kind of change does it always have to be? More activity, more numbers, bigger
That's right.
crowd, but so just open that for us.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. So I was having a conversation. I was in Los Angeles earlier in the week, and then I got home yesterday, and I've had 2 different conversations on 2 different coasts of the country. Okay, so one's from Georgia, one's from California, to give you context to how different these conversations are. Polar opposite states, polar opposite sides of the country. So I was in Georgia last night and had a conversation with a dear friend about a church that he and I know very well. He's worked at for several years, and it's a large growing church that has significant footprint in the body of Christ. And he said, "Man, we've got a lot going on." He said, "We're busier, but we're not growing." He goes, "We're busier than we've ever been, but we're not growing." And I think sometimes I thought of this, and I'm like, yeah, I think sometimes we think activity equals growth, and that's not true.
Right.
And so there are situations I've seen churches add on campuses to mask the plateau they're experiencing at one campus, because they're trying to show growth with no momentum. So you can have growth and not have momentum. You can have growth and not have health, because growth is not an indicator of health. So you've got to make sure that you are in your situation. And in churches, it's like, just because of my numbers, and it could be declining in numbers, but if we're increasing in activity, that's not healthy either.
Hold
So
that
this
thought.
was,
Hold that thought. Why are you giggling, Jared? I want to hear your reaction to this.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you can have growth and not have health, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Here's why I laugh. Philip, I've heard you say this a lot. Healthy things grow.
Sure.
So there's a little bit of a paradox here, but what I love is it forces us to define growth and success successful growth, healthy growth, right? Because so often these churches that you're talking about, Greg, I would argue they're trying to copy what they see on YouTube. They're trying to copy what
Sure.
they see on Instagram. Like they think that this is the type of growth that they're supposed to have.
Right.
There's context though to what their health and their growth should be
Yeah.
defined as. So that's why,
Oh, sure.
and I wonder, even Philip, for you, what you would say to that in this paradox of health and growth, and how to help churches define what healthy growth is for them.
Yeah, I mean, I know you could easily say healthy things grow, but you also look and say, well, cancer cells grow, weeds grow. Like
Ugh.
there's a lot of breakdown of that stuff when we talk about it, because the wrong seed planted in the right place
Yeah,
will grow something you don't want.
good.
And so I think that's right, is assessing. And I know that's where you're going, Greg. So I'm going to give it back to you, because the paradox of what you heard and what you saw between these two churches in two different contexts, still kind of struggling with not the same thing, but have a different perspective about it, I think gives us a little bit of that answer.
Yeah, and let me I'll close the thought Jared had there too, just as a nugget. But you can have the right program in the wrong culture. So
Mm.
you may go and what you see on YouTube, what they're doing at their church may work for them because their culture is different than your culture.
Yeah,
You can't take their activity and apply it to your culture and expect the same results.
Right.
You've got to make sure that everything's in alignment. And so here's the other side of the country. Here's the other side of the coin. So I was with another dear friend of ours who pastors a significant, all churches are significant, but a significant church in the body of Christ as far as influence. And he said something that I thought, oh man, that is a message that I wish I could put a billboard in front of every church to remind them of. He said, listen, guys, I get a pro forma of our attendance, our giving, our small group numbers, how good was our message received, how good was our worship. He said, all those things are all measurable outcomes that I want to know. Those are all things that are good. That's a dashboard that we lean on. He said, but the one thing that we measure that stands above all else, he said, all that can be up and to the right and can be experiencing amazing momentum. But the Bible says that we are called to make disciples. So we can have growth and we can have salvation. We can have great worship. We can have amazing small groups. But if we don't have discipleship, we can have quantity growth without quality growth.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, I wish more churches would hear the message of quality growth over quantity growth,
man.
because it's the quality of your growth. Are you discipling people? Are you making disciples, or are you making attenders?
Wow.
It's that idea. Are you creating momentum and do it over the right things? Or are you seeing great people show up because you got a great pulpiteer that's an amazing orator and they just came to hear you preach? Or are you actually making disciples that are going to make a difference in their community? Because that's what we're called to. And he used the scripture. And he went after it. So I'm using this person to illustrate what I would not personally say, because I don't have the moral authority to say it. So he said, the Bible said, go and make disciples, not go and make a brand. Don't go and make a great Instagram following, not go and make great worship albums. He said, go and make disciples. So all those other things are great and wonderful and good. But if we're not making disciples, we may not be making a difference. And I just thought, man, what a great contrast to growth, no growth and a lot of activity, to no, the right kind of growth. So we may be declining in number and increasing in discipleship, and I would call that a win. And I thought, oh man, I don't know. I don't know how many churches would go, hey, we lost people, but we got more people discipled.
Right.
That's a win.
Right.
But if we measure against the right thing, which is God's word, he's right.
Right.
That's a win. We could have less people and more disciples and we win.
Right.
And I thought it was incredible.
And it's to the testament of what those right disciples will produce long term will be more right disciples. And so
Correct.
that's
We'll come with more growth.
right. Which is what you'll see as you get up and you start to feel yourself plateau. There's always, it's called the J curve. You're always going to dip in quality, but to reinvent yourself, you have to do that, because what was popular, what was attractive, as you change and adapt, many of those people will say, that's not the church I joined. That's not how it used to be. That's not what I was wanting for myself. That's fine. You're not always going to take everybody who is with you from point A to point B. And you actually don't necessarily want to. As you reinvent or change, you're going to see that dip in quality, but you're going to go further, faster, and higher than you ever were before. in the right context if you're making those kinds of changes. So
I was talking to a friend of ours here in Atlanta, a guy named Philip Anthony Mitchell at 2819 just a few weeks ago. And well, here's what was fascinating. People see where he is today and they judge how he got there.
mm,
But when I sat with him in tears as we're having a conversation about where he was before he got to where he's at, he had spent 10 or more years making disciples, not seeing the results of filled rooms, not seeing the results of what we would say butts and seats. It just wasn't happening. He said, man, we felt like we didn't know we were ever going to grow. He said, but I cared more about making disciples than I did about our Sunday morning attendance.
yeah.
And now, years later, you look at what God is doing at the church. They have thousands of people standing in line just to get into the building. But he's never been a church that are people are attracted to the pulpit. They're not attracted to a worship album. They're not attracted to attending. They're attracted to discipleship making. And I think if we'll stay in that lens and stay in that lane, however your church needs to make disciples. And one of the things that this guy said in California, he goes, and discipleship is not an 8-week course. It's a lifetime commitment to becoming a disciple of Christ. It's not a checklist. It's not a necessarily growth track, and growth track's a good thing, but it's not a growth track. It is a growing track. It is something you stay with for the rest of your life.
Ooh, ooh, watch out. Rebrand, little,
Let's go get yeah.
little rebrand. Just real quick on that. But okay, keeping people and multiplying impact is a huge difference, and so often I think you mentioned that, Philip, about how we get lost in the fear of, well, we can't change this, we can't do that because these people might leave, or these people might be upset, and there comes a time where you do have to release or let go in order to take that climb. And so are we really about multiplying impact? Because so often to see multiplication, we do have to prune away in order for that growth to take place. And so I don't know if that encourages anybody else, but when I'm listening to Philip and Greg, I'm about ready to run around my desk. I don't have an aisle to run down, so I'll just run around my desk.
It's so amazing because I think if we're not careful, we'll let the sting of 2020 wear off, because that was a huge revealer
Wow.
of what I would say: we made great Christians, we didn't make great disciples. The disciples stuck because the disciples were not dependent upon the weekend experience
So
and the
good.
lights and the gathering. They were committed to following Jesus in community with one another,
Yes.
and they had their giving already built into their regular rhythms.
Yeah.
And that's why 2020 was a massive shakeup. And I think we're seeing a resurgence on two aisles. One, those people that have forgotten what we learned and is just going back to what we did, filling up rooms. And those that are saying what you're saying, Greg, is we cannot forget the lessons that we learned in the wilderness
Amazing.
as we go into this next phase, into the, and so it's like, man, let's stay committed to that. And I've seen a rise for those that are growing in terms of not just more worship services, but like foundations courses, classes. Now, again, I pair training with relationship. That's what gives us development. So if we can do that and we can equip people, but then we're walking with people as they're being equipped long term, I think that's the recipe for success in terms of discipleship, development. All of that is we have to pair them together. But I'm seeing a rise on those midweek services that are deep Bible studies, foundations classes that are, helping people go from you don't know what it means to follow Jesus to now you're walking in a relationship with him, to even tiers of that in terms of like, what does it actually mean to be a disciple and a discipler for others? So it's given me great hope when we look ahead. And what's cool is the ones that are embracing something like that, they're seeing this growth in terms of people are coming. As I just think when we read scripture, like it's in our hearts to be drawn to that. We don't want to be drawn to a show. We want to be drawn to life change. So I can echo that for sure.
Well said.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Jared, I got a question for you. Greg answered this in terms of his relationship with Craig. I know you probably maybe you wouldn't have brought him to the forefront, but we believe the best development happens in the context of relationships with Focus 412. Who's somebody who's played a pivotal role in your growth as a leader, and what's something practical they did to help you grow, Jared?
Mm. So many. There's a big long list. Both of you guys are on that list. I'll use Mark Cole as an example, who's our CEO of Maxwell Leadership, the company that I work with. And one of the things that he's taught me very, very clearly is how to be one-on-one with someone and make them the most important person in the world for that hour, hour and a half, and how to also pull out the brilliance that's within them. There's a way to go about encouraging individuals with context that I think he really is artful with. And so I've learned a lot about that. It's one thing to encourage someone to be better. It's another thing to get inside of their mind, inside of their heart, and ask good questions to really understand who they are, to then propel them to the next level and help them reach their potential. And everybody can do that. It's not like high gifting type of thing. I mean, he's very gifted, but I think about both of you. I've said it, Red Lobsters with Greg Brooks, where he's like pulling stuff out of me. I've said on Zooms with nobody's better at being intentional on a Zoom through a Zoom screen than Philip Engel. I'm just telling you. And so you're able to pull out brilliance from people, and I've learned a lot from that art.
So, Jared, I completely agree. And Mark Cole's an exceptional leader. But one of the unique things about Mark that I love is that he not only will see something in someone and say it to them, but he'll see it and then he'll seize it as well. And what I mean by seize it is he'll call it out and he'll teach you practical ways to get it even better. So when you see something in a leader, you need to seize that moment with them and actually not just celebrate it, but actually take advantage of getting it even better. And that's one thing Mark has always done for me. And I think it's a sign of a great leader. They can see potential in you and they teach you how to go to even another level, that you don't plateau and you constantly are getting better and better in the areas that they see in you.
That's so
And
good.
this just comes right back to even where we began. I think that the message here that we're all seeing from each other and learn from people that have invested in us is they've cared more about what uh, God can do through us as the like mentee or as the follower than they care about what we could have done for them. And like that's just such a powerful reminder of like, man, we have so many people around us that I'm excited to go out and just like champion the guys, the leaders that are around me to say like, let's help you make your thing great for the kingdom. So what a treat, guys. Thank you so much for leaning in, for giving us a little extra time, but just be in relationships and in relationship with the kingdom. All right. Love y'all so much. So grateful. We'll talk soon.